All right, here we are. We're back. We're on. I'm going to go ahead and start like we usually do with our top sponsors, and we are getting so much closer to adding a little bit more to this list. We had some conversations this past week that have turned out great, so be looking out for that. But as of now, we want to say a special thank you to uh, FPEA, one of our top sponsors. They've got a lot coming down. I think I just saw that they posted the vendor opportunities for their upcoming convention, which is exciting. So go and check them out and show them support. They show us support, and we appreciate it. Also, let's go ahead and start with a little bit of. Oh, there's my soundboard up for everyone to see. Our recognition wall, and take a look. It's grown a little bit as well, and we appreciate all of these fine business owners. They donate at $100 a month, and they get visibility for their business, and they show support for us and everything that we're doing. And there are lots of opportunities. If you see someone that you recognize, we had Northridge Academy on the call. Was it last week or the week before?
Yes.
Man, it was last week. Man, my days are like blending together. Oh wow, time is just flying, and there's always a room to add more to this wall. So if you see someone there that you recognize and you want to show them support as a part of our community as well, by all means, please do so. I think I actually saw a lot of these on a call that we were on recently with Step Up. And without, I guess, further ado, maybe that'll segue us into talking about what we've got on the board for today. Brenda, where would you like to start? Good day.
Well, as you all know, we've said over and over and over that Step Up has a lot on their plate and they're doing their best, but that doesn't help parents get reimbursed. It doesn't help our home education instructional programs get
Mhm.
reimbursed. So this week we were able to set up a call with the new head of the PEP program at Step Up for Students. And we were able to discuss with him the issues that the home education instructional programs are having with the reimbursement process, either direct pay or parent reimbursement. Some of the programs are not happy and don't want to be on the direct pay, but they do want to serve the parents in the program, and the parents can pay up front and then get reimbursed, but not if those programs are not approved by Step Up as a provider. There's a lot of confusion between direct pay to the provider and then for the parent to use the provider and get reimbursement for the payments. Um, and I might add that the website is confusing as to how they're supposed to register. So, having had that call, uh, uh, Everett Johnson, who is the head of that program now, was very open and willing to help our providers, but he could also see the difficulties that they were having. And so we've decided that it will be in everyone's favor if we continue the process and have a biweekly call to bring those issues to his attention, and then let him have about 2 weeks to see if he can get with the people dealing with the computer program and get the issues worked out, and then also any problems that the providers are having. Um, it's my understanding, and I could be wrong, Crystal, you've heard these and you've also seen the website from a user standpoint, that the PEP program and the FESUA program are going to be using the same approved providers, not necessarily all of them, but it would be in the same area for them to choose from. I'm not sure exactly how to say that, but they have to go through the same process to become a provider for both of those programs. And so it may be that some of the FESUA providers are having the same difficulties that the PEP program providers are having. And we're talking about not schools, not private schools, but the home education instructional programs. We're always odd man out in home education because people understand private schools and how that operates. People, even today, who are in positions of authority, have a hard time understanding that parents are the ones in charge of their child's education, and they're the ones that direct the education. And so they don't know what to do with homeschoolers. They just don't fit in the regular boxes. And so
Yeah.
it does take a while to educate them. And I think we're running into that problem with the PEP program. Not
Hmm.
there's no lack of support or interest in trying to help and improve the program. It's just that the people who designed the website and the program, they didn't understand home education, and now the new
Sure.
people in charge are having to learn about home education. So again, we're still in a learning curve. But you
Hmm.
know what? That's a reason that we need a consistent lobbyist in Tallahassee, because
Yep.
we know who to contact, we know how to make those connections. And quite frankly, I'm thrilled that we've set this meeting up on a biweekly basis with
Hmm.
the head of the PEP program so that we can get all of those issues resolved, and it will work as smoothly as the old legacy system did for the parents who were on the FESUA.
Yeah. I know.
That's our goal, and we're working very hard to get us to the point of accomplishing that goal.
Absolutely. I know that for me being on the call listening, as a person who, well, our company builds websites and designs them, and the user interface is always something that is being balanced against the database, where you've got, how do we categorize everything? How do we make it fit? How do we make all the options appear? And then when you're unfamiliar with your target audience, which for us that would be homeschoolers or home education families, we don't fully know the options they would like to choose from, or like when it came down to some of the invoices having different date ranges or things that needed to be considered with location, and people not wanting to put their location down for obvious reasons that we think are obvious to us, that they don't even think about, because when you're looking at private school and public school systems, everything is systematic. It can be like chunked up in bite size, and no one can really deviate from that systematic approach. But when you look at the homeschool community, everything's custom. Like everything is like my own unique way, and done to their own needs. There are patterns and there are behavioral similarities, but finding those and fine tuning the system, it's going to be a bit of a process. So I'm also excited that they've agreed to do the calls biweekly, because I think that informing the process as we go is going to be really, really helpful. And I'm glad that they agreed to allow us to be a part of that and pull in our homeschool community leaders with us into those calls, because that's good. It's very important that they have that kind of feedback. So
Crystal, do you
anyway,
want to talk a little bit about the direct pay, my scholarship, my scholar, that's a hard one to say,
shop.
my scholar shop
Should-
vendors versus the providers? Can you kind of put some
Sure.
clarity to that?
Yeah. So one of the things that we were talking about on the call with him was the difference between people who are in the provider marketplace versus vendors versus people who don't want to be a direct pay but still need to be in the system so people can submit reimbursements. So they're trying to figure out how to code all of that. But if you are a company that sells tangible goods, then you can apply to be a vendor in My Scholar Shop. If you are a company that provides intangibles like classes, then they have something called the provider marketplace, which is essentially their new way of saying direct pay providers. So some home education instructional programs would fall into that if you want to be direct pay, where parents could choose you from the list and pay directly from their funds in Emma. There are
Could you
other home
move
education.
closer to your mic a little bit? You
Yeah.
sound like you're like in a tunnel. Sorry.
And then if
There we go.
some home education instructional programs don't want to be direct pay, and in those cases, they still need to be an approved provider in the system so that parents can select them from the drop down list. What I gathered from the call is that they are actually trying to automate as much of this as possible. So they're trying to remove the need for a human person to review every single reimbursement and
Right.
kind of put it on the parents and the providers to cross
Mhm.
check rather than having a step up person have to review every single reimbursement. So, what they're trying to do in their system is get the home education instructional programs input in such a way that if they want to be direct pay, they have all their services listed and parents can choose those. And if they don't want to be direct pay, parents can still choose them from a drop down, submit the reimbursement, and then the program will have to log in and verify that, but that it will remove the need for a physical human processor to check every single reimbursement. So I think it's going to be a good thing in the end because
Mhm.
it's going to remove that confusing piece that's been happening where the processes are asking for things that they shouldn't ask for, like teaching credentials and all of these things that a home education instructional program isn't doesn't need to provide.
Mhm.
Um, but it's taking time because, like Jason said, they're having to figure out how to bend their system around like their very rigid system for how they input things, how to make that work for something that's more custom because
Mhm.
not every home education instructional program charges a set fee for every single
Right.
class. Not every student is
They're not
taking the same
standardized.
number of classes. Not so there's a
Mhm.
lot of little factors that they have to figure out how to put into their system
Right.
while still allowing it to be something that the provider and the parent could both input and cross check each other and remove the need for a human processor to review it.
Yep.
That's
And a lot
where
of
the pieces, yeah, that's where the confusion is happening.
yeah, and a lot
One
of
other,
options like charging up front versus charging as you go, and when payments come in, there's a lot of
Yeah.
customization in the home
They also had their
education.
system set to where the home education instructional programs would be paid when the class is completed, which isn't going to work for home education instructional programs because some parents pay upfront for the whole year. And then the home
Mhm.
education instructional program needs that money to pay their teachers. So there are just like logistical pieces that they're trying to figure out.
They are working on it. Brenda, you were saying?
one thing that he did clarify, and I think this is important to parents who do pay upfront to secure a spot in the home education instructional program. And we were told initially, I think you've posted something about this in the forum, but just to reemphasize, is that we were told initially that if you made any payments prior to July 1st, they would not be reimbursed. However, what he's explained on the call was uh, if you paid ahead of time and you put in a service date that was after July 1st, when those uh, services would be delivered, that they
Mhm.
would reimburse them. Did I get that correct, Crystal? Is that
Yes.
your
And
Yes.
understanding as well?
yes, and
Yes.
I
But the
didn't
purchase date and service date are different.
yes, and I didn't specify that in the forum yet because I got the impression that they're going to have to kind of
Fix
tweak their
that.
system a little bit to make that possible for parents to do. But that is the goal they're working toward is if you paid for this school year, it should be able to be reimbursed as an expense for this school year. So they're acknowledging that the service dates are what it should go by rather than the purchase date. Um, but I think my understanding was their system just isn't allowing for that currently because
Okay.
it's right now it's requiring like when I've submitted reimbursements, you have to put in the date and that date has to match the date that's on the receipt. So that's going to run into issues for parents if their credit card receipt shows a different date than what they're putting in as date of service until they update the system to allow a date of service to be input. So
So I want to address something that's coming in the comments real quick. There's a couple I want to get to. Because Debbie Tharp asks who holds Step Up for students accountable if they're not responding to the reimbursements within the 60-day period. That's a good question. I think that I really want to urge people to be considerate when looking at that conversation, because there is 90,000 applications that
open
reimbursements,
Yeah,
open
he said there were
reimbursements
90,000 open reimbursements as of
that their team is having to
July.
manually go through. So I think putting ourselves in their shoes, well, I'm not trying to advocate for breaking rules or guidelines or anything like that, but these are humans. It's not a Coke machine that we put 50 cents into and it gave me Mountain Dew. Like, these are real people with real jobs under real pressure with real stress.
And he
And
did
I
say
I personally would hate to be having to do the job that they're doing.
Yeah.
And the fact that someone's doing it is great. The system being thrust upon them with all of these changes all at once was not ideal, and we're dealing with a not ideal not backlash, but a not ideal result as an outcome of that. And so I feel like a little bit of leniency is important. But having said that, Crystal, I'll come back to you in a second. Let me read the next one, because I think this is the fear on the other end of it. Someone says, while I understand that it makes it more convenient for providers to be direct pay, they should have disclosed this beforehand. It seems like this is a bait and switch tactic. We all trusted what was expressly stated. We could choose the providers that worked best for our children, and we would be reimbursed. It seems abundantly clear that the state really meant to have oversight of which providers they will allow funds to be used on, even if the provider meets all of their express criteria. Bait and switch. I'm going to wholeheartedly disagree with this comment and say that there is zero bait and switch, and that I think that mindset of looking for roaches everywhere that you look, you're just gonna see the negative. You're gonna find them everywhere you look. You're gonna find them. It's like when you go to look for your car keys and you cannot find them anywhere, and then you stop looking, and then they just appear. The good or the bad in things, you're gonna see the negative. If you intend to look for the negative in something, you're 100% always going to be able to find a fault, a glitch, a gimmick, and then you can blame it on some big conspiracy theory that they're all just trying to control our children. I think that's
Can I add some
nonsense.
clarity on that too?
Go.
No one is saying that it has to be a direct pay provider to be approved.
Correct.
What they are trying to do is encourage home education instructional programs to apply and become a provider in the system to remove the need for a manual check for every single reimbursement.
Correct.
If you were to submit one that wasn't in the system, it would just need to go through a manual check.
A manual check.
They're trying to simplify
Manual checks.
the need to speed up the process by removing the need for every single reimbursement.
Yes.
So
Trying to
if
get
your
rid of
home
90,000.
education instructional program is not approved in the system, there is a thing you can select that says provider not listed. But if you select provider not listed, then it gets kicked to a manual review. So they're not saying that you can only choose from this list. They've never said that.
No, they're
They're just
trying to streamline.
Yes, they're trying to streamline the system.
And they're trying to
To
put
make
in
the
criteria
reimbursement.
for the streamlining. And they're
Right,
trying
and
to get it. Go ahead.
to make the process faster for parents, because they know that parents are frustrated with how long it's taking. So they're doing this in a good faith effort to actually improve the process. They're not trying to force anything on anybody. The thing I was going to say before was that he did say on the call that they have actually tripled their processing staff. So they are working intentionally to try to speed up the process. They know it's going slow right now, but they have 90,000 open reimbursements. But the perception that I'm getting, because I'm in PEP Facebook groups and I'm following the general vibe from parents, and parents seem to assume that Step Up just either just doesn't care and they don't care how long it takes, or they're intentionally slowing the process. I've even seen, and Brenda, maybe you can speak to this, I've seen the theory tossed around as fact. People are saying it like it's a fact that Step Up makes income off of interest on parent accounts. So they want to take their time processing reimbursements because they make money if the money stays in the parent accounts. So there's this idea that Step Up is intentionally being slow, and that's being spread around as fact. So I would caution parents not to jump on that bandwagon of assuming that this is an intentional malice.
Hmm.
All of our interactions with Step Up have shown that they are really trying to improve the processes for parents. It's
Yeah.
just going to take time because they have a
And
lot of logistics to work out and they have a big workload that they're dealing with all at once.
yeah. And I want
Brenda,
to go
did
back to the bait and switch thing. There, a bait and switch would look like, oh, you came in today for this 50% off, but we don't have any of those, but we do have some of these. You should grab some of these. And I have not heard any stories of anybody being switched to any other provider or any other thing, uh, as being suggested. Like, oh, well, that curriculum's not on the list, but you could go and grab this evolution curriculum. I know it only teaches 24 pages of evolution out of 100, so it's not that big a deal. Like, no one is bait and switching any of the curriculums or providers that anyone has showed up
yeah.
and asked for. There's a massive amount of coding that they're trying to do to streamline things and coming up with the right ways to categorize stuff. And then, this is not the same as that, and we put it in this way. It's a huge undertaking,
Yeah,
and I
there's
would
just to add
caution
before Brenda
mercy,
responds so that
please.
she can respond to this as well. The
Go ahead.
other vibe that's going around is that everything in my scholar shop is intentionally overpriced, which is not true because I've compared prices and some things are more expensive, but some things are actually cheaper. Lakeshore Learning, the stuff in my scholar shop is actually a dollar or two cheaper consistently per item than on the actual Lakeshore Learning website.
Hmm.
So again, those are things that are just floating around. And then Brenda, I've had people say to me when I've tried to respond in Facebook groups that respectfully, I think Step Up is just telling you what you want to hear. And you're just believing them that they're actually trying to help parents when really they're not. So that's the attitude and the vibe that's going around. Brenda, I'll let you respond.
I'm really sorry that parents feel this way. I know
Yeah.
it's hurting their budget. I know it seems like
Yes.
they're not following the law, but let me give you an example of just one thing that I've been right in the middle of. When this bill started in January, going forward, I was asked, how do we define home education instructional programs? Um, we had been discussing this for the years that the Gardner Scholarship came into being and the FES, what now it is the FESUA. Step Up just let me pick and choose and define because I knew the groups, I knew they were providing something good. In the legacy system, they just allowed me to say, this group needs to be approved. And then they take it to DOE, they would look at that group and what was on the internet. And the three of us would agree that group was okay. Going forward after the bill was introduced, they kept saying we've got to have a definition for
Hmm.
what is a home education instructional program. Some of you know that I came up with a definition and I've ran it through the groups that I knew of and I said, does your group fit this? Would you be included? Okay, so starting in January, in May, I thought we had a definition, but between DOE and Step Up for Students, they came back and tweaked my definition, which was great because I had narrowed it so finely that there absolutely could not be any fraud. I didn't want to see this program go away if it benefited parents. They came back with the criteria that's in their purchasing guide, which broadened the categories and allowed more groups to qualify under their criteria for what the definition of a home education instructional program is. So you can see just from that one example, it took 6 months to get that definition, and they were working to benefit parents. Now, the other moving parts in this, as Jason's talked about, the people that I deal with don't do the database and the website and all the drop down stuff. This is Step Up is a huge operation, and they have various segments. So they have to one area has to talk to another area. Their main thing was trying to get all of the private school students into the private school that they wanted to go to. And then they had to approve those private schools through DOE, make sure they met all the criteria. There's so many moving parts to this that, believe it or not, the PEP program is very important to home education students, but there were only 20,000 scholarships compared to the unlimited number of students in the other program. Step Up for Students has been highly criticized in the media because they're making too much money or they're not moving fast enough. Well, if you want to move faster, you got to hire more people. Or, as Crystal said, you've got to streamline the process. And so building computer programs is not cheap, right, Jason?
No, it is not. Everyone always hates when I tell them what our prices are, and they always ask, why is it so much?
The time involved and the expertise required, it is a massive undertaking. And we're not here to say that Step Up is not making some mistakes or that they're a perfect organization, but we know working individual to individual, and I'm not saying Step Up in general, I have key people I've been working with for over 20 years. Those people trust me. I trust them. I've not gotten incorrect information when I've asked for specific things. And they take my concerns on specific individuals who are having trouble and work on those individuals to get approvals when it's not a mass thing, but it's somebody that's fallen through the crack. So they are working toward individuals getting the reimbursement. What we're running into now is a systematic problem, and the whole system has to be fixed in order to make it more streamlined, and we're working on that. But they hired a new person to be over just the PEP program, and he's only been there 4 weeks maybe. So we had no specific person to go to voice our concerns. Now we do. And he's listening and he's trying to figure out what's happening and why isn't this working. And then he'll go back and talk to his computer people and try to get it worked out. We've had these issues with DOE forever, like trying to figure out how to code a home education student in the school district's computer. And getting their IT people to make the change sometimes takes 3 or 4 months. So I know for parents who are not getting reimbursed, who are getting the runaround,
it's a frustration.
Part of that is just part of the system. And as Crystal's mentioned before, they have hired a third-party call center to try to deal with the volume of calls. They've done their best to train them, but not all of those people have the actual correct information. So when we find that parents are being told incorrect information, we take that back to the people I work with at Step Up, and they say we need to educate our call center people. They don't know what you're getting, and we have to convey that information to them because we're at 2 different ends of the spectrum, and we've got to try to find a way to resolve those problems. And that's what Crystal and Jason and I are doing on a weekly, daily basis, is trying to be the intermediary there and say, parents are seeing this, they're struggling with this. How can we fix that in your system? And so
Yeah.
And
that's
everything is taking
And
time. Like
yeah, and
Brenda
there's
and
a
I have
follow-up.
emails out that we're still waiting to hear back on because again, these people at Step Up are
Yes.
not only dealing with PEP.
Oh, there's
So
many facets to it.
even though they, we do have a relationship there and there's trust there, we aren't the only issue that's coming across their desk.
Yeah, so the follow-up comment says bait and switch is a process where people are lured into something, and when you agree, the terms are changed without notice. That seems to be happening. The reasons behind the change may not be malicious per se, however, terms have changed, and people relied upon the initial written representations. I want to say that a bait and switch is inherently malicious. It is an intentional gotcha. It's a switch. It's a bait and a gotcha. That's malicious by its very nature. And the terms, as far as I know, none of the actual terms have changed. A delay does not constitute a
So I
change in
think
terms, meaning this is what we agreed to give you access to, and now you no longer have access
yeah,
to it. Terms have changed.
if
You
I
have
could speak
access to
to
all of
that
it. It's
point
going to
for a
take
second.
time. Go ahead.
Because I think what parents are seeing as the terms that have changed are the dates that they were told they were going to get initial funding, the dates that they
Okay.
were told that they were going to be approved and processed. Some of them are still waiting from like July, August
Sure.
and haven't been switched. The dates,
Sure.
the time frame for reimbursement, which is for some people creeping up on the 60 days and still no movement on the reimbursements at all, or they were approved, but then it's been a month since approval and no funds on the card. Even the card themselves, they were told that they could use it in certain ways, and then the actual card came and it can't be used in those ways. So that's where the frustrations are, and I understand
Sure.
those. But I don't think any of those were intentional from Step Up.
No.
They're just
And
having
I
to deal with
think
a lot of unforeseen complications. And
we have
on
to
the
be very
cards,
careful.
just to say on the cards, all of you probably got this email if you're a PEP parent. I know I got it. Um, they literally sent out an email this past week that said, "We have heard your concerns about the cards. We understand your frustration, and we're looking into other options that will allow parents to have the options that we had said you would have for
Mm-hmm.
how you obtain your reimbursements." So
Mm-hmm.
there is, it really doesn't make sense to me to think that Step Up is intentionally trying to trap
No.
parents when they're expressing they're actually sending out emails saying, "We've heard your concerns and we're trying to look into this."
Mm-hmm.
I think parents are just frustrated, and that frustration
Of
is
course they
churning
are.
around and around and around.
And frustration's
one.
valid. I just want to be very careful to realize as home education parents, we represent all home educators across Florida. When we interact with an entity like Step Up for Students or AAA, the other scholarship program that is available for people to use because there are options, but when we interact with them, they don't, as ignorant, no offense meant by that word, just mean the lack of information, lack of knowing, as ignorant as they are of home education families and what it's like to be a home education family, we're giving them a peek behind the curtain. We're giving them access to see what we look like, to see who we are. And if we're not careful about the language that we use and the types of interactions that we have with them, we're going to leave a stained reputation for home education, a difficult reputation for home education, and that's one of my big concerns is that we have to be careful about the language that we use. If we're saying things like this is a bait and switch, and we're calling in words that have inherent gotcha or malice intended behind them, we have to be very careful about that. On the other end of this are real people, and I don't want this to be like a whole session where we're just advocating for Step Up for Students because man, we have our gripes too. We're waiting for money too. We're all in the same boat. However, it's really important to realize when we interact with these entities, we're the face of home education for them for that day, for that moment, whatever that is, and that's critical to keep in mind. Critical. Go ahead, Brenda. Sorry.
One of the things that I generally say to people, I understand that you have money out, you live on a tight budget, you're generally a single parent wage earner, in order to be able to home educate your children. So I understand the tight money issue, but
Mm-hmm.
this is a gift that the legislature has given to parents. You didn't have it before.
Yeah,
And
we were
you
doing it
only
without
get
it.
you get only 1/4 of your money in this first quarter. And so hopefully you haven't overspent your budget for home education. There are really inexpensive ways to home educate your kids without buying expensive curriculum or taking classes. Um, and if you were already paying for those things, then this shouldn't break your budget. And I know the frustration is there. Listen, I deal with people like that, in other areas where they've made mistakes, maybe not intentionally, but it's, cost me time and money. I understand. But you also have to understand that, number one, the legislators were trying to do home education parents a big favor because they understand how difficult a home education uh, family budget is to balance with the one income family. Um, and they understand the cost of things. So while I wasn't in major support of this, now that they've given this program, it would be nice if there was some gratitude for something you didn't have before.
Sure.
And I
At
saw
least
this with
initially.
the FESUS program where I was just flabbergasted. We had worked so many years to get a program to assist parents of children with disabilities, because if you think it's hard to homeschool regular children, imagine if you've got children with autism and Down syndrome and Prader-Willis and all of these very, very difficult diseases and disorders that they're having to deal with therapies and on to try to get the child in the best possible place for education. And we finally got it into place. And then parents were griping and griping because they couldn't buy this or you couldn't spend that. And it's all of that is so carefully designed at the legislative level, and they tell the scholarship funding organizations exactly what they can spend the money on. So they've got to make sure that they don't go out of the bounds. But now that we've worked out all the kinks and we're like 8 years into the program, parents are so happy that they have this additional money to get therapies that their children would not have gotten if they hadn't had this money.
It's massive.
So, yes, it's frustrating at the beginning of these new programs for everybody involved.
Take a deep breath.
And, I know that the legislators hear your concerns, and in some cases, the law can be changed. But in other cases, like they've said, 60 days. Okay, after this initial period, Step Up will probably be following it in a closer manner in 30 days payback. But, in the very first initial years, it's just very difficult. So,
So we
anyway,
get a couple of things coming through as well. She had a follow up, and she says, "Understood, and please know that I've always been very patient when talking with Step Up for students, employees. I thought this was a safe community to articulate those frustrations of myself and so many others, and it is. This is a great place, and I'm glad we're having this dialogue. Maybe I come across as a bit fierce and passionate about this subject, but no, I
little,
appreciate a little. Do I? I do come across that way, don't I? I'm very passionate about home education and parents' rights, and I don't really want to see anything jeopardize those, whether it's our disposition and attitude or we say the wrong things that create a trend with momentum that shoots us in our own foot. I definitely don't want to see that. And I think that it's important that we have a resounding voice, a collective voice that's on the same page. Because the more that we're on the same page and we're articulated well what our real needs are and our real frustrations are, without using what's the word, exaggerative language, right? Or impugning fault to someone. What did you say?
Hyperbole.
Hyperbole. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, without the
And
use of hyperbole.
yeah, and for
Or
me also that we have factual information, that we're
yes.
not making assumptions about what's happening behind the scenes
Mm-hmm.
and spreading that as though it's fact, because I see that happening a lot. I've seen people saying that Step Up is removing money from parent accounts as punishment when they complain online. I've seen
Oh,
people saying that Step Up, like I said earlier, is profiting off of the interest, so they're intentionally delaying the reimbursement process. Spreading that kind of stuff is inciting like a mob mentality that isn't really helpful to anybody because it's not grounded in truth.
yeah,
Um,
and I don't understand how Daleen Howell keeps the heart that she keeps. She says, "I'm so
she's
very
been so
frustrated."
patient.
She says, "I'm so very frustrated. Crystal knows my Step Up for Students saga. It's ongoing and excruciating, and it feels never ending. Yet I am still grateful for this opportunity, and I am hoping with all my heart and everyone else's issues will smooth out, and our children's education will be next level with this kind of funding." And she has clapping hands and heart eyes. Yes, absolutely, 100%. I believe that mindset, that heart, and that approach, Daleen. Thank you so much for having that kind of disposition. It goes a long way when we're
And
trying to help
yeah, and
have civil conversations
I
to
want to
work
say we
through.
are here to advocate for parents. So like
Yes,
Deleen's issue is one of the issues that Brenda and I both
100%.
have emailed personally to our contacts. But again, we're not the only emails coming across their desk. So we haven't
Hmm.
gotten responses on it yet. But we are advocating. So if you are
Yes.
like one of those issues that have fallen through the cracks and you have a weird situation,
Hmm.
you can come to us and we will try to advocate for that. But again,
Yes.
they have 90,000 open reimbursements and a lot of
Right.
stuff they're trying to
And
deal with.
speaking of
So,
advocating, Debbie asked the question, if you have a home education program you use that you pay throughout the year, can you submit the payments as you make them, or do you have to wait until the class is over and has been paid in full? This question was one of the questions that we were handling on that call, and it took probably 20 minutes to get through the nitty gritty details of how their system works and when those payments can be submitted by the parent for reimbursement, and that the home education instructional program can invoice them, and do they have to wait until the end of service rendered? And there's a bunch of legal requirements that they have programmed into their system that they have to follow. And then of course we have our needs, which is to pay and get paid and to have everything customized for us in the working out of that. But to answer that question, yes, it is their intention to have the system allow the home education instructional programs to have the ability to bill it ongoing and invoice for it ongoing, so that it can be paid incrementally or be paid up front and reimbursed.
yeah, they were
E-
even
either
talking
of those
about trying to get the home education instructional programs to input like a monthly rate or something so that
hmm
they can process and reimburse more
in their
frequently
system will
in
recognize
their
it.
system. But
Yep.
their Step Up is having to have a meeting with all their people that deal with that to figure out how to actually make that work in their system.
Hmm.
So
And
that's
they
the piece
have
that is sort of the hang up right now.
and they have an earmarking system that runs alongside of the transaction system, so that it will earmark funds that you've designated for stuff for reimbursements, so that you don't accidentally overspend.
Overspend.
And that's a complicated thing that runs alongside this other one that has to they have to update each other when something is spent. Yes, to answer your question, but that was not an easy conversation. That was something that took us a while to work
Yeah,
through
it
the
seems like it should
nuances
be
and the needs.
straightforward, but it was not. It was more
Correct.
complicated.
Yeah, there were things that they came and I didn't know they had requirements on legally, that they can't issue the reimbursements until services have been rendered. And I was like, well, that's interesting. And that's where the I didn't know that, you know, um, stuff like that comes out of the woodwork, and it's like, okay, well, let's workshop how we then make set this
Yes.
up and make
And
it
this was
function.
something where the home education instructional programs, leaders of some of those groups were also on this call. And that's the same call that we're going to repeat again next week with him to follow up because he took all of our concerns and feedback to his team. We're going to meet with them again. So it's an ongoing process. I would just ask to be patient. Like for now, submit the
Hmm.
reimbursements as you've been doing, but expect that it's going to have to get kicked to somebody to review and you might run into complications. But
Certainly.
they are working to educate their processors better about home education instructional
Hmm.
programs, and they are
Yes.
working to set up a more streamlined
Yeah.
system for it. It's
He
just
took a
going to take
ton of
some time.
notes
He did.
on our call.
Yeah.
Another question says, funding, 1/4 funding times multiple kids is a lot, and as much as you can homeschool on the cheap, these parents are enrolled in programs and therapies they have done for years. And this year, you're suggesting, I'm implying that because she didn't say it, but this year, you're suggesting they should homeschool on the cheap, question mark, question mark. I disagree. No, we're not saying that. And two, therapies are a part of the UA scholarship, which is still on the legacy system on a whole. So
It's
it's
a
not touched.
renewal.
We're talking about PEP, the
Well,
new.
if you're new, then UA is on Emma, but if you're a
True, true.
renewal family, it's not.
Right, but
But
she's
yeah,
talking about parents who have been enrolled in this for years,
what
so
Brenda
they
was
would
saying
be
is
on
if
the
you
UA
were
system,
already paying for it,
untouched.
then you were already paying for it. So
Right,
this money that you've been given for PEP is in addition to what you would have already been paying.
right.
So it's
Yep.
still a gift. It's still a blessing that you can even apply for reimbursement. She's not saying
Hmm.
not to do the programs, but just to realize that it is still a gift that you even have the ability to apply for reimbursement for something that previously you just had to pay for with no option for reimbursement.
Yeah. So Debbie Tharp asks the question. So what do you need to do to submit in this case? If the invoice says classes are from August to May, what date should you put on submission? If you've paid up front for those, you've already paid. You put the August date, um, and then you submit for reimbursement.
Yeah, my understanding from the call was that for now, because they haven't, you know, put their system in the ideal state where it's like a smooth process. For
Hmm.
now, put the date that classes started as
Hmm.
your
Service date.
when you input the date, and it may not exactly match the receipt. But then when in I think there's a box on most reimbursements where you have a little line that you can type explanation. That's where I would type these classes were purchased for this school year, like put the dates for the school year.
And have
Um,
started.
and that way they know that you're submitting something for this school year, even if the receipt date shows a different date. But it's going to
Hmm.
be probably necessary for the receipt to say 23-24 school year with dates on there somewhere so that they can verify that in fact this was a purchase for this school year.
And
But
so,
Hmm.
go ahead. I
I
thought
was
you.
just going to say there's the little slot where you're supposed to put the date of purchase. My understanding from the call was parents can put the date that classes began in that date slot since they don't have a date of service slot separate from the date of purchase right now.
But that's one of the things they've got to fix in the system because some of the home education instructional programs don't want to put the date that the classes started
Oh,
when their receipt shows that it was paid in May
Right.
for the next
So
school year.
so follow-up question. This was one of the things that we asked him on the call too. And I don't remember the answer to this. If I think it was let's figure that out. But what if your program costs are higher than your first quarter funding? Do you wait until you have enough funding? So that was another issue with the reimbursements was that because of the earmarking system and because the funds are released in quarter increments, making sure that when you're submitting for a reimbursement, that the amount for that reimbursement is available as funding. Um,
yeah. So
Otherwise, that will kick it back.
for right now, my understanding is if you can get your program to issue you a receipt that's broken down by quarter, that
Hmm.
might be the easiest way. You can
Yeah,
submit a quarter at a time, even though you paid up front. Because
right.
again, we're now submitting by date of service, not necessarily the date you purchased
And
it.
it'll be a little bit of extra
Um,
work, but
but the other option is to wait until you have enough funding in your account to cover the whole amount and then submit it all at once because their system will
right.
not allow a reimbursement to go through that is bigger than the amount.
Correct. Correct. Yeah, the
So
system does have
yeah,
that limitation. So it is probably better to work with the whoever is handling the financials for it and try to get them to issue, um, take that invoice and break it up,
or even
and
if you
issue
have a
say,
receipt that you can submit that has like, you paid in full up front, but has the quarter cost broken down so that in that little
mm-hmm,
explanation line, you can say,
you can
I'm
put it
applying for reimbursement just for quarter one right now. But yeah, they're going to need to see something that matches the receipt. So if you can get your program to issue you a receipt broken by quarter, that would probably be the easiest way to get it approved without issue. For now, again, because they are actively working to try to add better options for home education instructional programs.
sure.
But
We've only got a couple minutes left.
Yeah.
And I
Let me
wanted
read one more comment real quick before you dive into that because it's positive. It says, Shara says, I'm really thankful for these live chats. I dismissed FESUA based on my experience with another state, but watching every Monday always encourages me that Florida is doing things much differently. Thanks to the UA scholarship, two of my special needs kids are undergoing more in depth neuropsychology evaluations that will help us better direct their education, provide therapy or counseling, and help us advocate for them in the future. That is beautiful. And thank you for sharing that with us. Go ahead, Brenda.
Thank you. That was always one of my top priorities, to get help for parents who have children with difficulties learning. So the legislature is in special session right now, started this morning, and the House bill is House Bill 3C, and the Senate bill is 4C. Both the bills do exactly the same thing, so they're identical. And they are, even though Step Up for Students has advocated for students, for more scholarships for students with disabilities, the legislature, for some reason, and where none of us are really sure why, except the pushback from the school districts, because these kids bring in more money to the school districts than traditional students do.
Okay.
And this money is coming out of the school district's budget, or the school budget,
The UA.
education budget. But they have had so many requests from parents who were not able to get in, because the legislation last year increased the number of students in the FESUA up to 26,500 students. And that was all Step Up could approve for this year. So for this year, for the school year 23-24, right now, the legislature has increased the number of scholarships for students who are on the waiting list in both Step Up and AAA, so that at this point in time, as soon as the bill is passed, and I would say probably by the end of the week, if you've applied for an FESUA scholarship for your students, Step Up now has the ability to serve your students. Then after this school year, the legislature's hoping that they have met the number of requests, and that they will then consistently be increasing the program by 3% of the state's total exceptional student education full-time equivalent student membership, meaning how many students in all the public schools are on a special needs funding program. 3% of that number, Step Up can increase the scholarship for those students. This has happened in the past, and they've never met the waiting list. Obviously,
Right.
this program is working for kids with disabilities, because parents now have the control to spend the money on their student to customize what that student needs, whether it's more therapies, a different expensive curriculum for tutors, whatever that child needs to hopefully reach his highest potential in education. Parents are in control, and it's a unique program. And I am just so grateful that the parents have that option to use the money that would be spent on their child in a public school, but they have control over it. So I think it's good news. You can watch those two bills this week. I feel very sure that they will both be approved. And if you're on the waiting list for an FESUA, your child will get one this school year.
Melissa asks, do FESUA students have until December 15th to apply for this school year?
I heard this morning, it doesn't say in the bill, but they said they will be able to apply through December.
Okay.
They
And
said that orally. It's not written anywhere. That's what they were
okay, got you.
saying when they introduced the bill.
Got you. Someone asks, do you know if uh, there's a plan or a requirement for Step Up and AAA to align in guide and process?
Yes, their handbook, a purchasing guide, has to be approved by DOE in December. I don't know a date in December, but they have to be aligned and they will have a uniform purchasing guide.
Cool. Doesn't necessarily mean their systems are going to be the same. But yeah, guide and process.
Requirements and what they will approve. So the definition of a home education instructional program would be the same for both of the scholarship funding organizations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, someone says parents don't have access to the money though until there is competition in the SFO space. There is no oversight. Step Up for Students confirms that Friday that 5K students were still unfunded. There is competition in that field. There's another
Yeah,
organization. You're welcome. Sorry,
AAA
Val.
is the competition, but from what I've heard for people who applied through AAA, they are having an even unhappier experience than the people with Step Up. So
Sure.
um, we don't know as much about their inner workings and their process because they're not communicating directly with us as like Step Up is. But I think that AAA is also having issues just with the logistics and the vast number of things they're trying to process.
AAA is not as computer oriented. They're really a hands-on type organization, and it slows their processes down. They've been trying for 3 or 4 years to get a new computer system. I think they finally got a new one, but whether the PEP program was part of that design, I would say it's not. And so they still probably will be processing by hand. And unfortunately, the amount of money that they can keep to run the operation is based on how many students they have. Therefore, they get less money because they process fewer students, and it's going to be hard for them to catch up. And let me just say,
Mhm.
people say there needs to be more competition. You have to be in operation 3 years in Florida before you're able to get any of that money, which is a 3% amount of the number of scholarships, before you get reimbursed or able to use money to operate. So somebody's going to have to raise a tremendous amount of money in the private
Oh yeah.
sector to set up a scholarship funding organization. There were a couple in the beginning, but there's also so many hoops for them to jump through.
Hmm.
They're audited and audited and audited to make sure they're not handling the money inappropriately.
Hmm.
Um, and it would be almost impossible at this point to set up another scholarship funding organization. The legislature doesn't set them up.
No, and the
That is,
amount of money that it would take to get a program on the digital end where it needs to be to operate smoothly, you're talking multiple six figures of an investment. It
yes.
doesn't necessarily what you would need to break ground, but over time to tweak it and get it to where like to take the information that we have now and just build one that we know we would need, you're talking multiple six figures investment in development just to
And
have
that's one of
just
the
to have
problems.
system.
That's one of the problems why AAA isn't bigger and doesn't serve more
Mm-hmm.
students, is because it takes a massive amount of money to get the computer programs up and running for all of these, and then to hire the people that you need to implement them. So they've remained small because they don't get that much money, because they don't serve that many students. And it's kind of like a vicious cycle. They're great, and I've worked with them in the past. They really have students at heart and try in every way possible to serve the parents that are in their program. But it's just, they just don't have the money that they need to operate. And so when people say, oh, there needs to be more competition, they don't really understand what that means, and that's why we're just trying to give you some back end information. And the other thing, I'm going to need to check this out, but my memory is that this was another point that was brought up. Step Up doesn't get to keep the interest money that's earned on your student's scholarship. That money has to be put into their scholarship account as it's earned. And I'm pretty sure that's correct.
I think so. I saw a parent actually comment back to someone who was saying the thing about Step Up wanting to earn interest off of us, and they said, my interest has always been paid back into my son's account. They don't keep that. So again, that's why I'm saying, please make sure you have act like truth. Let's ground everything in truth.
Yes.
And you
Because
can do that by going back and reading the law. The legislature stated that they didn't want parents' money to be held up and then somebody to earn money. They saw that as a potential fraud in the program. So, they've tried to cover all their bases,
Yeah.
and there's no oversight. I hate to say it, there's no real oversight because we only have basically one scholarship funding organization that handles all of these scholarships. AAA does some, but they just can't gear up to handle all of these.
Mm-hmm.
And the oversight is audits that they go through to make
Mm-hmm.
sure the money is spent appropriately. They will get dinged if they don't meet the legislature, but the legislature also realizes what a massive job this is for them to implement these programs. So what would the legislature do? They would say you can't do it anymore, and then who's going to serve the students? So they've created as much balance and oversight in the programs as they can, but you also don't want to cut off your nose to spite your face. And that's kind of the situation that the legislature is in if they do too much more regulation of the scholarship funding organizations.
So here's a good question. Ms. Johnson, who was talking earlier, says, "Do you have any insight on the school districts and their ability to make use of the PEP funds? I had to turn down the funding for my I think I had them turn down the funding for my high school student because he takes an engineering elective at our zoned school. I was told that they will not allow him to take the class if he's a PEP student."
The problem is that instead of getting the money directly from the state and they can count that student in the class when the head count is done in October and February, the money automatically flows to the school district for that student. PEP students are not registered with the school district. You register your attendance with Step Up for Students or AAA. So the school district can't draw down money for that student. They've got to have a contract with the SFOs in order for them to submit. And they've never gotten outside money before. Florida Virtual School was set up so they could take outside money. And Florida students get free classes with FLVS, but that's because they're registered as home education students. FLVS has had to come up with a contract with Step Up in order to be able to pull down the money. The school districts are slow, as I've said in the past many times. The wheels of government are oiled
You can
with
stand there and wave money, and they're like, "We don't have a contract to take that."
Yeah. So DOE has told the school districts, either you take these students and come up with a contract, which has to be done district by district, or you just provide, and there's 67 of those, or you just provide the classes free. But really, DOE has no authority to force the school districts to make a contract. So that's one of the issues that the upcoming, not the special session, but the regular session is going to have to address. They're going to have to put in statute, school districts must. And then there's some authority there to make them do it. Right now, there's no authority. people just didn't anticipate all of the complications that were going to be involved in implementing this program. And so while the legislature said in a little group of numbers, statute 1002.41 parens 3 through 12, that's the only mention that they are supposed to get the same flexibility and opportunity as home education students. But the rest of the laws were not changed to force those other
So
entities to make those changes.
this does kind of lead me to, and maybe we'll wrap up after this, but this does kind of lead me to the idea of, if we're not caught in our frustrations and we can take a step back and look, we're really good at customizing options for our kids' education, right? So she follows up with a comment, or he, I don't know. It says, "I was really hoping there was a way for me to pay for this class a la carte. I can't find a replacement for this class, as it's a collaboration with Lockheed Martin that I really don't want my aspiring engineer to miss out on." And it's like, well, there are a lot of other options, actually. We were just talking with AmSkills, that's in Trinity, Florida, about one of the huge programs that they have, scholarships available for their programs. And these go through machining, engineering, certifications, and they're all geared toward job readiness directly into a field. And they work with, I think they said 180 different companies that they have agreements with, that they help provide employees to after they're done getting their trainees certified. And they walk them through interviewing processes and all kinds of stuff like that. And it's available for adults or kids in high school who are looking to do their next thing and maybe don't want to go to college. So there are so many options out there. There are so many opportunities. I think sometimes our frustrations are born out of seeing one that we're set on not work out, but there are bukus of really rich experiences for our kids that are available.
And those are internships and apprenticeship programs, and
Mhm.
those are on the DOE website. Maybe we ought to do a live on what is available, and I can't remember the name of it. There's regional groups that focus on what's available in your area. It's set up by the state.
Yes.
For some reason, that's just not in my brain today, but we can
Some of them partner
pull
with the SBDCs.
we can pull those out, and that may be a
Mhm.
course that she could get in dual enrollment for her student.
Yeah, I would think so. That's really, really cool. Um, I don't have anything else. Let me check on most of the comments are, we've gotten through them. Um, yeah.
Sorry if we lectured everybody today. That's just a point sometimes that just bubbles out because we're working so hard to help you and to try to resolve the problems that we see in these programs. We know how much time we're putting in, and we're a little defensive, and maybe
Yeah.
that's the reason
I,
that we come
I
across like that, because we're really working hard to help.
And
we are. There's a lot. Go ahead,
let
Crystal.
me just add one thing. If you are trying to get an answer for something customer service wise from Step Up, we mentioned that the call centers are not always accurate. I have heard from multiple parents, though, that the Facebook chat, like if you actually go to Step Up's Facebook page and you message them through their Facebook page using the direct message, they, I think, are staffed by actual Step Up people, not third party people. And so they have been a lot more informed and a lot more helpful to parents, I'm hearing consistently. So if you've already submitted a support ticket and done all the processes and you still can't get your question or concern answered, try the Facebook page chat for Step Up. Just, as
That's a
something to
good.
try. Because I know people are frustrated and calling the call centers and getting iffy information is not great. So
Or waiting on
try,
the phone for 2 hours.
yes, try the
Yeah.
Facebook chat.
No one needs that kind of frustration added to everything else that might be going wrong in their day to be stuck on a call for 2 hours and then get information that wasn't helpful. That is no one's cup of tea. Thank you to everyone who's on the stream today. We appreciate all of you for being here. I will echo what Brenda said, which is I hope we weren't too harsh in dealing with it. I think personally, my a huge passion of mine is parents' rights, education, and language. The language that we use matters so much, which is why we lobby to protect it, what it says and how it's said. Um, and some of that lobbying is on the behalf of you to the legislation, and some of that lobbying is on behalf of the world to just be more clear and how we say things. But I appreciate everyone who's on the call today or on the stream today, and your participation. Your questions are phenomenal. If you know someone who would benefit from this information, please take a moment and share this video as much as you want. These videos do stay here. I also take them and put them up on YouTube afterwards if people are more of like a YouTube person. I know I personally like to curate playlists and kind of let them roll while I do other things as a way of kind of catching up on stuff while I work so I can stay on top of everything I need to know. If that's beneficial to you. And then help us get the word out. We're here, and we're gonna stay here and keep trying to put in all the effort to help all of you and keep you up to date on what it is that we're doing and what's going on. Without anything else to add, Brenda, do you have anything, or are we good?
Nope, we're good.
We are good. Well, we hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your Monday and the rest of the week. The weather has been absolutely phenomenal. It's perfect for getting out and digging in dirt and doing learning exercises outside. It's fantastic. I'm going to hit our sponsors one more time and tell them thank you. Thank you to our top sponsors. Thank you for FPEA, and there is more to come on that list. I'm getting really excited about that. Without further ado, we will bid adieu. You'll have a wonderful day.
Thank you.